I found coming home even shocking. The culture shock and like, okay, everybody else's life has not stood still. They've
Mhm.
kept going. Look at all these changes and certain things like that that just make the transition weird and difficult when you think it's going to be easy. So you not only have the shock of going over to a different culture, but then the shock of your own fast-paced Western culture and
Yeah.
friends that are, still having babies and changing and all these things that you have to catch up on. And it's overwhelming both ways.
You're listening to Breaking the Ice podcast, a podcast that I created in 2020 to connect women within the hockey world. My name's Devin Dodaro, my husband's Charlie Dodaro, and we've played literally all over the world. We have 2 kids, 2 dogs, and let's just say hockey has taken my world by storm. What I've learned is that this community and these experiences are very specific, and you should not have to go through this alone. Through this podcast, I share the tools, resources, do's, don'ts, and what's helped me along the way while continuing to learn from each and every one of you. So lace them up and tune in for episodes twice a month. And make sure to follow the page on Instagram at Breaking the Ice Pod. Hello, everybody, and Happy New Year. I cannot believe it's January 1st. Oh, I can and I cannot believe it. This past month has felt like a million years to me for some reason. I absolutely love being a mom on Christmas and doing all these things for my kids, but that is not to say that is not absolutely exhausting. Oh my gosh, I have certainly have had a holiday hangover. It's just been a long month, but we are going into January and kind of like what I talked about on my Instagram stories lately. With January usually comes kind of a January lull, a January funk. I recorded an episode with my friend Brittany on this, I think like 2 years ago, and then I'm gonna record an episode about the January funk in a few days with one of my friends, and we're just gonna be real and be honest and talk about how this can feel like one of the longest months of hockey. As today is December 31st when I'm recording this little intro, I am kind of reflecting on the past year. And it's so crazy to think that a year ago we were in Slovenia, a different country, ringing in the new year, aka sleeping by 10:30 and not staying up till midnight. I can't even remember what we were doing last year, honestly. I don't think we did anything. But yeah, just another low-key New Year's Eve for us here. I feel like so much has changed. A year ago, I was battling very, very severe postpartum anxiety that I just tried to power through on my own, and it was a very difficult time for me. I think I didn't share as much about what was going on with me as what was actually going on with me, but now that my daughter has turned 2, my anxiety has gotten so much better, and I am gracefully reminded that healing is not linear. It still comes up for me from time to time. I think that's common and normal. But I'm feeling just so much better in that sense. Yeah, I feel like everything that I've gone through this past year has been a very big period of growth for me. And I've certainly learned, you know, who, what, where I give my time and energy to. And just really surrounding myself with people that fill up my cup, that make me feel good. Going into January, I'm definitely going to be making more calls back home, touching base and catching up with friends that I haven't caught up with in a while, diving into my kids. Again, these 5 weeks in January can feel very long, especially with time off from school, if you have older ones in school. So just know you are not alone. This is a safe community and space for you to be able to feel all your feels, and hopefully I can validate you within that. Today on the podcast, I have Ashley Booth joining me, and Ashley is just an absolute amazing human being. We have wanted to do this recording for years. We've been connected for years over Instagram, and I'm so happy we finally got to sit down and record this episode together. She's an absolute gem, and it's one of those episodes that I just left being like, that was a really good episode. And I love all my guests that come on my podcast. And all I can hope for is that people are just open books and like to share and be vulnerable. And Ashley did just that. She shared some really powerful, deep, vulnerable moments on this podcast. And I am pretty sure everybody's going to be begging for a part two. When we were chatting before about things that we would want to be talking about, there was just so many more topics that I wanted to cover. But by the time I looked at my clock, it was like an hour and 20 minutes in. And I'm like, okay, we have to do a part two. So, Ashley, when you're listening to this, we'll schedule a time and a place sometime in this next year or so, and we'll do a part two because it was just so much fun talking to you. So I know you guys are going to love this episode. If you have not written a review for the podcast, I would love you to go to Apple Podcast, rate and review. Just write a quick little blurb about why you love listening to the podcast. Your support does not go unnoticed. It means the world to me. Anyways, Happy New Year. I hope you guys enjoy this episode, and we'll chat soon. I am super excited to talk to you. It's been a long time coming. I feel like this has been in the works for, I feel like a
Fresh since you
year.
started. Yeah.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
couple of years, I feel like. And
I
then,
think I did a travel Tuesday for you
yeah,
like way at the beginning.
yeah, you
We've
did
been
Norway.
together for a long time.
I think you did Norway.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah, you did a good
That
travel.
was before I had Rosie, so that's been several years. 4 years, 5 years ago.
Wow. Yeah. We always start off just chatting a little bit about, who you are and a little bit about your hockey story, and then we kind of just dissect it as we go. So feel free to snag the floor and give it a go.
Okay, well, my name is Ashley Booth. I am originally from Tennessee, so I did not grow up with any sort of hockey knowledge at all. That really started when I married David. David Booth is my husband. And he has been playing for, I guess, 19 years now. Like we're kind of the oldies now. So we've been married for 10 years. And I came along at a time where we have not been to the same team twice since I've been part of his life. I'm just gonna say that I'm the bright spot in that. Like he had a couple long stints with like Florida and Vancouver, and then we've been hopping around ever since. We have two kiddos and we're overseas now. We're about to go to Budapest, so it's our newest adventure.
I feel like we just need to start with that, is that you've never been on the same team twice.
Yeah, that's
Let's
fun.
go back to like pre-kids. How did you look at that pre-kids of team hopping? Were you like flexible with it?
It always felt like, I guess, a new adventure. And whenever we started, it's kind of, I don't know, it's different. I remember the first year, so we were dating his last year in Vancouver, and then right after we got married, he signed with Toronto. And I remember being like, I remember exactly where I was in my in-laws' kitchen. And whenever he got the off, he had two offers that year he was really considering, and he took Toronto. And his family immediately was like, yeah, original six, original six. And I was like, what are you talking about? What does that even mean? Like, I had no idea, no earthly idea. And going from being from Tennessee, I had my own job, my own things going on, and we're picking up and moving to Toronto, which doesn't seem like it's far away, but it's a different country. So it's not like I could automatically work in Toronto and figuring that out. And it was just really close to where he grew up in Michigan. And he used to grow up going to hockey tournaments in Toronto all the time, but I'd never been there and I didn't realize like what it entailed. We were dating in Vancouver, but I didn't spend a whole lot of time there. But just the energy that Canadians have surrounding hockey, immediately stepping into something like Toronto or probably any original six city, it was just so intense. Um, yeah, that was really intense. So to learn everything, it was just kind of like a slap in the face, honestly.
Yeah, a lot of information at once.
Yeah, a lot of information and just a lot of stuff that was over my head. But I mean, it was a nice year that year and a nice room to be in. So and he wasn't it wasn't like he was one of those players that was kind of at the forefront of the attention. So I there was a bit of observing, so that was good, but it was still really interesting to navigate. But it was like I feel like every year it's been like, okay, here's a new adventure that we have. Whenever we go overseas, to Europe, and we've been to Russia a couple times and Belarus, Norway 3 times, all different teams, and going to Budapest, is that all overseas? I think that's a lot. No, Germany last year. Oh my gosh, and that was such a fun year. See, it's been
A lot.
chaos. Yeah, it's a
19
lot.
years.
It's a lot to remember. Yeah. But it's almost like we do better in that high stress. Like it's almost like the comfort of our home and being in America and just the comfort of that and being around family, almost like you can work against each other a little bit more. I don't know if that makes any kind of sense, but whenever we have to go figure out a new country and live there, it's like, all right, you might be mad at me, but I mean, I remember that being the case on the way to Russia. He was kind of, I can't remember why, but I remember on the plane, he was a little tiffed at me, and I looked at him and I was like, well, I know you're mad at me, but I'm the only one you got now. We're going to Russia and nobody can come see us. So, I mean, and it's kind of fun to figure out. I think it's good for, I mean, I guess it could be good or bad, but for us personally, I think it's always a good experience for a marriage. It's almost like, all right, we need our like dose of counseling. But he's
Yeah.
40, so like this is coming to an end, so maybe we just need regular counseling. You know?
Yeah, now we need like PTSD counseling from like all the hell and back that you've been through in
Yeah,
your 19 years of
yeah.
going all over the place.
Yeah, but you know how it is, like going overseas and just even if it's English, even if you're not figuring out the language, you have a whole new country and just area, city, team to figure out and people, and you have to work together. Like you are each other's person.
Totally. It reminds me of that reel that I've seen a lot where it's like whenever my husband or whenever my kid is having a meltdown, my husband and I look at each other and we say same team. And I was like, oh, that's so cute. Because I feel like in those moments, it's easy to just kind of like let your emotions get the best of you, you know? And then
Yeah.
it's like, okay, wait a second. Like, we're both dealing with this. Like, it's makes it
Mhm.
easier if we can just collaborate together here, try to figure it out. Because you're right. Like, it's basically the only person that you have when you're moving so far away from home. And if you guys are tiffed at each other, it just feels like awful. So,
Yeah. It's like
yeah,
I'm alone in this world on the other side of the world with a huge time difference. Can't go
exactly.
to the grocery store without using Google Translate. Like
Right. So,
everything. Well,
then you guys, so okay, so was Toronto the last place you played before you decided to make the move to Europe?
no, it was Detroit.
Okay.
Well,
So
actually, David did something crazy. So we went Toronto and then 2 years in Russia, 1 year in Russia, two. I should have written this down before I talked to you. And then that's when you know you've been doing it too long. But
yeah.
then we came back to Detroit. So that's usually, whenever you pull out of the NHL, usually it's you don't come back. So um he actually made the team on a tryout, which was crazy. And that was his hometown team.
Oh,
Um, Grew up with season tickets to Detroit Red Wings games. So ending it in Detroit was crazy. But we actually just bought our first house that year, which was, a few years into our marriage. As soon as you hang the curtains, you're going to get traded. Don't ever buy where you're playing. Um, so we
true.
never did
Take notes,
that,
people.
right? Um, and then so I remember we bought that house and I was driving the U-Haul of our things that had been stored out to Montana, and he's going to the tryout, and he gave me a kiss, and he said, "All right, I'll see you in a week." When they cut him is what he meant, and I was like, "Okay, see ya." And I like got in the truck and drove across the country and unpacked all of our stuff. And about the time I'm getting settled in, he calls and he was like, "So they offered me a contract." And I was like, "Well, I hope you don't want all your stuff that I just drove out here." He's like, "No, no, no, just leave it. It's fine. Just bring one suit and I'll be fine." So we were one suit I don't even know if he had another suit the whole year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's okay, that's a lot. Okay, so then
This
obviously
is whiplash. This whole life, though, everything is just whiplash, isn't it?
it is. Yeah, it kind of feels just like a never-ending game of fight or flight. And
Mm.
someone responded to something I said too, which made me be like, that's actually kind of sad. But they were like, when my husband retired, like within 6 months of him retiring, like she's like, I could literally feel like the stress leave my body. She was like, it just felt like a weight was lifted. And like I was so tired, so exhausted. And I think my body just was finally like,
You can
okay,
relax.
you can
You're
relax. And
you're
I was like,
safe.
that's actually like really sad, because we do carry a lot. Like we can joke about it and stuff, but it is a lot to like have a family and pack up and move and you leave your support system and your
Mhm.
life. And I can relate to you so much with like team hopping because like moving teams every year, you never really get that sense of stability, like even with friends or your house or if you're going to see your stuff again, like it's just constant figure. I mean, it's like I feel like you need a whole like map of okay, your stuff is here and this is where we're going and how are we going to get this to this and this, like one of those
So many
detective
moving
maps.
parts. Yeah, right,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. How do you feel like the whole experience overall from like start to finish has shaped you like positively and negatively? It's
Oh
kind
my
of a
word.
loaded question.
I think, the first word, honestly, if I'm being totally candid and honest, what comes to mind is ill-equipped. And I don't mean that in a terrible way, but like I hate this phrase. And I remember someone telling me this actually in a really difficult time last year that God never gives us more than we can handle. And I was like, that is just not true. First of all, it's not biblical. And secondly, that's not true. Like we have to deal with so much, not only the moving parts that we're talking about, but even real life things that happen.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I know you've had a baby overseas, so have I. I've had a miscarriage overseas. Like you
Mhm.
deal with real life, like real life does not stop. And then you have to insert all of these moving parts and all of these components that come with living this life. And I mean, ill-equipped in a way of I have realized every year I feel like there's some just piece of this onion that comes back, this layer that I cannot depend on myself. Like I cannot pull myself up by my bootstraps. And that's how I get through every year is walking with like I have to walk so closely to Jesus because there are some moments where like I remember when I was going through my miscarriage when somebody said that to me in the middle of finals. So there's a whole, you know how serious like finals is and you want them to finish well. And I mean, I'm like actively having a miscarriage during this.
Mm.
People are saying that I have the flu and I'm like, no, I don't have the flu. I'm like, no, there's a lot
Yeah.
more happening. Um, but I had to actually like be induced and go through labor and deliver her. And somebody said that, and I was like, it's just so that's not that's not right.
Right.
Like there are so many things that we have to deal with. And the only way I can get through it, especially in that moment, was like, Jesus, I can't take a step. Like a lot of times I'll say, okay, do the next right thing, take the next right step. If you don't know what to do, take the next right step. I did not have a step to take. And I
Yeah.
was just at the complete end of myself. And it doesn't even have to be that dire of circumstances because I have felt that way in Russia. I felt that way just with the shock of everything. And being alone in Siberia and not speaking English and just like you just it's just such a difficult headspace to be in that you truly get to the end of yourself in so many ways when real life happens and you have all the hockey complications that come along with it. Not just moving and language and going to the grocery store whenever you don't know how to read anything, but also their contracts and injuries. And there's just so much that we have to carry and deal with
Yeah.
where like, I've gotten to that end of myself so many times where I'm like, I can't do this. I don't have anything to a lot of us are like, okay, you have it like inside of you, pull it out inside of you and you manifest it. And I'm like, I just do not, I could several times I've gotten so to the end of myself where I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I need Jesus. And that is the only way I get through some of these seasons,
Right.
truly.
Right. I think like you can get very disconnected from yourself because you don't have really like roots to like under
Yeah.
you to like
Yeah, you
feel
don't have other people around you to like lift you up and carry you. Your support system's at home.
exactly. Exactly. And like you seem like a social person. Like I feel like if you're someone that needs, social support and you don't always have that, like that can be very depressing. You know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
there's so many different aspects that can make you disconnected from yourself, especially when you're in such a foreign country like Russia. There's not a lot of English in Russia, from what I've heard and what I can imagine.
No.
So, like something like that, where you're not even able to like communicate or like that just little small talk, like at the grocery store or something, that would just make you now,
Yes.
like probably after 6 months of that, if someone tried to talk to you, you would be like, oh my God, thank God.
I remember coming back from Russia, and you don't even realize like what skills you lose or how your brain changes. I mean, this is me like getting into brain stuff because my husband's had a lot of concussions, but we came back from Russia the first year and immediately went to a restaurant because we're starving. We didn't live in
Yeah.
Moscow and St. Petersburg, people. Okay, those are really nice places.
Yeah.
We lived in like what they call the village, or also lived in Siberia. That was our address. You're welcome. Um, met someone that lived in Siberia. So, but I'm sure there are plenty of people that listen to your podcast that can say the same thing, which is crazy. Nobody relates to that. But nonetheless, we went to a restaurant immediately after being there for I think five months, 6 months. And we've always done short seasons overseas, which we can get into why later. But we went to a restaurant and there's all this English around us, which we haven't heard in months. Like they would translate whatever David needed if he needed direction on the ice. And that's really it. That's the only camaraderie he had in the locker room. And I had nothing. Um, and it was so overwhelming. I'm trying to look at the person in front of me and have a conversation. And I swear to you, I'm probably like this, like, I am trying so hard to focus on what you're saying, but you hear everything else around you. I remember it, like my brain could not tune out every other conversation because I
Yeah.
wasn't used to it anymore. It
Yeah.
was difficult. And it's just interesting how
Yeah.
that happens. Like just random things like that. When you come back home, it's almost like it, I found coming home even shocking, the culture shock and like, okay, everybody else's life has not stood still. They've
Mhm.
kept going. Look at all these changes and certain things like that that just make the transition weird and difficult when you think it's going to be easy. So you not only have the shock of going over to a different culture, but then the shock of your own fast-paced Western culture and
Yeah.
friends that are, still having babies and changing and all these things that you have to catch up on. And it's overwhelming both ways.
You had both of your kids overseas, didn't you?
I know I actually, well, I had Rosie in Norway. I
Okay.
had we named Ellie the one that I miscarried and had to deliver in Germany this past year. And then Blaze was actually born at home.
Oh, okay.
He came
Yeah, because I
quickly.
was gonna say, obviously, and I don't know if I'm gonna word this right, that it's like I don't want to offend anyone that's like given birth at home, but it's like when you go through things like that overseas and you're
Mhm.
experiencing like a lot of hard things overseas, I feel like it can be a little bit hard to go back home and relate to people that are going through certain things like in the comfort of their home, like where they're like, you know
Oh,
what I mean? Like it just kind of sounds like if someone's like really stressing about like something and I'm like,
yeah.
it's like it's gonna be
Minuscule.
okay. Or like, I don't know, like I just find myself like being more appreciative of like little
Yeah.
things that I probably wouldn't have before and like finding just more gratitude or like why are we complaining about this? Like this is literally like not a big deal kind of thing, you know? So it's like
Oh,
it's just
yeah.
interesting when you come home because I think I get culture shock in that
Yeah.
sense where like maybe I would
Yes.
have gotten caught up in that before
Hmm.
I started living overseas, but then now that I do live overseas, I'm like, okay, but this is like such a small thing we don't need to be
Yes.
about,
I
you
remember
know?
sitting in Russia. It's also very interesting to watch what happens at home from a different country. And so
Yes.
we were in Russia 2 very interesting years. And I'll leave it at that. Lots of elections going on there, here, all transitions and that sort of thing. Um, but I remember women be in the United States being up in arms about certain things. And I had just gotten to Russia and my pep talk, they told me 3 things. And what was, I remember it was, um, oh, work hard, be beautiful, stay silent. And they added, and don't ever shake a man's hand. And I don't know if that's the standard or if that's just what that person told me, but after hearing that, and then I've literally sitting on my computer and I'm watching this go down about the rights that we don't have. Not that we can't be better in certain ways, but I
Yeah.
was like, what are we doing? What? Like, what? Maybe you guys should come over here for a little bit and then maybe you'll feel better. Like, I don't know. Like, I remember getting home from a couple of different places. And I mean, we've had like amazing years. Like this past year in Germany was amazing despite, going through something so personal like miscarriage. It was a fantastic year. And Norway was had been lovely, but we've had good and bad and really, really ugly. I mean, ugly to the point where I remember getting to the JFK airport and David and I looked at each other and we're like, this is disgusting sidewalk, but I will kiss it. I love it. I will kiss it. I don't want to leave. Like it's the best day of your life whenever you get back some seasons, depending on like where you are, what's going on with your husband, all of the hockey details that come along with that. But
Yes,
very thankful to be back home.
always. Yes. How
Yeah.
do you guys handle those really hard, bad seasons?
Oh my gosh.
I know you
And
say that
it
you
was,
like rely on God and like how like what kind of like and is tangible like a right way to say it? Like
yeah, yeah, I get
what are
it.
some
People
things that
don't
you
believe
do
like
for
what
yourself
hmm
to kind of get you through when you're feeling down?
yeah. Oh yeah. We had one year where I'm convinced this coach was trying to break David's body and every bone in it. Like it was terrible. We were in a terrible place, very isolated. So it was just so dark in so many ways. Um, and there are reasons why I think that coach was doing this. We can always assess, but I won't go into that. But he had to go to the rink, the only one that had to go to the rink for 42 days in a row for 8 hours a day. That's not even allowed in the NHL to keep them at the rink that long. Where it was, I think it was workout, or maybe it was sauna, workout, skate, workout again, skate, sauna, and then they would like manage what he ate. Nobody else did that on the team. And it's like David, he doesn't act out. He's not one of the like he is consistently one of the hardest workers on the team. It doesn't matter how much experience he has. Like he will work anybody to the bone. Like he will be the hardest worker in there. Um, so I don't really know their mindset behind that, but that was a very tough year. I mean, because by the end of 42 days, your body's just like falling apart. And you have games in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Um, but I just remember in that particular season, um, of course, that faith was a huge component, and you just have to rely so much on God. But tangibly, like you're saying, just like loving him however I could. And of course that's hard on us as the girl and watching them go through that, but it's like, okay, I have to get him through this. I got to get him to the end of this season. If this is what he's going to endure, if he's not one, a lot of people have been in that particular league and called up and said, I'm going home because it's just that difficult sometimes and they can be that hard on imports. And he wasn't going to do that. Um, and
Wait,
he didn't.
sorry to interrupt you, but was this, did you say, I thought you said NHL. Was this in Russia?
This was in Russia. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. This was in
I was
Russia.
like,
No,
holy shit, this is,
yeah.
this is,
No, I said you're not even like allowed to keep people at the rink that long to require them to be at the rink that long in the NHL. That's where I said that.
yeah,
But
okay.
it was in the
Yeah.
KHL somewhere. And it was, yeah, tremendously hard. But in that moment, it was just like your survival kicks in and it's like, okay, how can I like help him? Like, can I massage him? Like, is he like, what is hurting? Like at that point, he's hurting and he's just like, you're both I'm trying to survive just like mentally more so, but him mentally and physically, he needs
Yeah.
help. So trying to love on him in any way. So I guess that actually was the year where I started trying to actually learn more about how I could take care of his body, whether that be food, supplementation, just different types of treatments, like cupping, or you can do the hypervolt on them, or like the other, I can't remember the other device that's very similar to that. Just anything, because you never know what type of treatment they're going to have. But if I can help him get through this, if I can love on him in that way, like what does he need? And that's something honestly that I pray for almost daily with him and my kids. Like help me to see the need that they have in these moments today that I need to step into because it's different every day. But that's what he needed in that season, just for me to help him get through it.
Yeah. I love that. You're such a good wife. I'm listening to that. I'm like, oh God, I need to start doing more of that stuff. Because I
Sorry.
think that, yeah, I mean, it's so physically exhausting. I can't even imagine like going through that. And then what you were saying, that's ridiculous that someone was like 42 days.
2 days. He probably still has that paper somewhere.
Yeah. And it's like
Yeah.
when they're that physically exhausted, obviously that's hard on you too. Like, not even just you're doing everything you can to support him, but like at the same time, if he's so physically exhausted, like he probably
Yeah.
just couldn't really show up as how he normally is, in the relationship
Right.
either. So that's
Right. And
that's hard.
having like that grace of recognizing that and just seeing how spent that they are at certain moments. Because
Yeah.
it doesn't even have to be that drastic of a circumstance. They can be spent from other things. The road
Yeah.
trips are absolutely brutal. They can
Yeah.
have
Game
games, all
injuries.
of who knows
Yeah.
how many a week, depending on what league they are. Like, I know in the AHL, they have to bus around everywhere. And like, he's always said, like, that's a grind. That's a grind. Like,
Yeah.
we're at the point where he'll look at the league and he's like, how do they travel? That's a
Yeah.
grind. Maybe let's go to this one over here. Like, Norway's, everything's close together. I mean, we honestly evaluate like that when we're considering at this point where we're going, he just turned 40. We're ready for retire. Why aren't we already? Why isn't he retired already? But
They just
nonetheless,
can't
I
do
mean,
it.
and at some point, we live in Montana, so the winter months aren't the favorite, especially whenever we do shorter seasons, we get a lot of like fog, and we could leave during those foggy seasons before the snow because we can't ski yet. So there's no snow. Well, let's go. If there's a contract where they're offering and they're still wanting to pay you, even though you're 40 or 41, that's fine.
That's
We can still
amazing.
go, get us away. But yeah, I mean it's crazy, but it's nice at the same time. But we're at that point where we don't care if there's a contract because we're we're getting
You're
older.
good. Yeah.
Kids. Yeah, we're good. Um, but if they're
Well,
there, it's kind of hard to turn down because that's what they've been doing for so long, and it's kind of like a European adventure. But we totally look at like how is the travel? Like, is it what I'm not taking my kids to certain countries that we've been in because you have to sacrifice, they might give you a better contract financially, but you have to sacrifice livelihood and just way of life.
mhm.
Whereas we would rather take a lower contract and go somewhere where the way of life is going to be fun. Let's expose our kids to a fun situation, a fun city. Gosh, last year we went to Germany, southern Germany, so Bavaria, and so we were so close to Austria, which I know you played in, which what is incredible. But I mean,
Amazing.
we were, gosh, I think so just 2 hours and you could get to Italy, Austria, France. So such a fun area. And it was
Yeah.
so fun for the kids.
What team were you guys last year?
We were in Regensburg in
Okay.
the W.
Okay. Okay, if you follow along with me, you know that I love Zoe strollers. I have two of them. I have the double stroller and I have a travel stroller, and they just came out with a new newborn stroller, and it's a convertible stroller too. So if you're upgrading your family from 1 to 2 kids, you don't have to upgrade your stroller. You can just literally convert it right then and there. Whether you're running errands, you're traveling, or you're just taking a stroll around the park, Zoe strollers are easy to fold, super durable, and they look just so sleek. Honestly, traveling in this hockey lifestyle, what I love about the Zoe is it's so easy for me to fold. If I'm flying on an airplane by myself or I have both kids in the car and I need to put the stroller in the back, all I do is just lift it up, it folds, and then it does not take up much space in our trunk. They're super lightweight, and yeah, honestly, I just could not ask for a better stroller. So if you want to test a stroller out, I highly, highly recommend, and I never recommend something that I haven't personally used myself. You can click the link in the show notes to get $15 off your Zoe stroller. It's so true though. Like we look at that too, and I think that switches once you have kids. Like because
Yeah,
you want to like as
absolutely.
a mom, it is so important to feel like happy where you are, where I feel like I mean we've gotten pretty lucky with locations and stuff, but like that was really major for me this year, like having 2 kids. I was like we need to be somewhere where like I feel the most
Yes.
stable mentally. Like I like having English was like really important to me this year. I was like if we can get a good contract and have the English, like I would prefer that. So it actually worked out.
Yeah.
Like same with you, we were kind of like looking at a few different teams that were interested, and like we were looking at the travel, we were looking at quality of life, like how would our day-to-day look? Like would
How
people
expensive is
acknowledge
it?
us?
Love
Yeah.
Norway, but you're too expensive, but we love Norway.
Yeah,
It's-
I've heard amazing things about North.
we didn't know that they had a hockey league whenever it was kind of a fluke that we went there. We didn't know they had a hockey league. And we're like,
Oh,
okay, we'll
yeah.
go. It was, I feel like for the past 8 years, we've thought, okay, we're done. We're done. There's no contracts coming in. And then, okay, well, let's take it. When it comes in, we'll take it. And it was so fun. It was so fun to be in Norway.
So
Recommend
why do you guys do the short contracts? I'm curious.
because we're old. I don't,
But
well,
like, do you get offers earlier in the summer, like when normal season starts, and you
yeah.
just like, no, 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 no? And like, is the money better halfway through the
Well,
season? Because people really stress about that. Like, I've had a
yeah,
couple girls post in the group or check-ins, like, still waiting on a contract in November and or December even, and they're like so
yeah.
stressed, and I'm like, something will come through.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, there are a lot. There are openings. It does narrow down the playing field. So if you're set on playing, it obviously makes sense to sign early. We're not.
Yeah,
So we just wait. We're like, we don't want to do a whole season. We just don't want to be away from home that long. If somebody is willing to sign, this year we signed quite early. And there were a few years where it was I told you earlier, like 16 hours heads up. That was before kids. That would not fly with kids.
done
But
that.
you
We've
get to
done
the
that.
point. Oh my gosh, it's insane. Insane. Literally on a plane telling my mom, okay, we're moving to Belarus. So like live at this moment we're moving. And it just happens so quickly. That's hard for people to wrap their head around. But I mean we're to a point where we don't have to keep going. And if someone is willing, I think because of his resume at this point, he has done quite a few shorter seasons, and he comes in shape where there are some leagues where you don't really have to come in at
Yeah.
the beginning of the season in shape, and you can just kind of work that way, but he comes ready to go, which is helpful because he has that reputation. But and I don't find that they pay much better.
Mm,
We can get about the same money waiting, because at that point you're kind of playing, so this is kind of business, but you're kind of playing on desperation also. So it does narrow down the playing field, but who needs to not be relegated? Who needs to make a playoff run? Who wants to win finals?
yeah.
So it's going to narrow down your playing field, but also they're more desperate.
Because
Um,
it's a specific position they need filled.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Because at
Yeah.
the everybody's looking for a job in May, June, and July. Like everybody needs a job unless you're already signed. So like yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Yep.
it's definitely a risk, but it has been a risk that pays off for us at this point, but we're willing to stop at the same
Yeah.
time.
You're
So
not
there's
relying
that.
on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I know.
That's
I think
helpful.
one of our like best contracts was when we waited till like mid-October to sign. I mean, that was a little stressful because it was right
Yeah.
before I gave birth, but I was like, we got paid more than we did the whole
The whole
season
season. Yeah.
last year because like
Mhm.
this is crazy. So
Desperate for
yeah,
a goal. It help. Yeah. And
yeah,
when they need that position, they need it.
yes,
So
like then.
again, the desperation play
But
off of it.
also
Yeah.
that can be kind of like stressful because then you usually have to go faster. Like you don't have as much
Yeah.
notice as if you were to sign like in May or June and then you know, okay, we're leaving July 30th or August 1st. It's like, no, we need like, can you be here in a couple of days?
Yes. 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 Yeah.
So do you usually like in those instances, does he go out before you and then you fly out later? Or like how have you guys done that in the past?
We've always done it together. I don't, I'm just now recognizing as you asked that that's probably strange. Um, actually, this is the first time that we have known there was a team willing to sign like right after we got home. And he's like, are they okay with us coming in January? Which we've never gone anywhere in January. And his agent was like, yep, they're fine with you coming in January. And we're like, all right. So
Oh,
we
wow.
knew we were going very early in the summer, but that was so strange. That's never happened before. Very few teams are willing to sign that early. But this one has been to finals and wants to win finals. So they're hoping. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know. You never know. There's that pressure too, where you have to show up and produce.
I've never heard of someone signing someone earlier in the summer and letting them come in January. I didn't even know you could negotiate that.
I mean, at this point, like David is like he's a master negotiator in every way. He's a Facebook Marketplace crazy negotiator. He's one of those people, like one of those really annoying people that'll try to buy your stuff for like dirt,
Oh
treat,
my
cheap.
God, that my husband does the same thing. He's like $5. I'm like, okay, this is
Yes.
listed for like 200.
Exactly, exactly. He's one of those people and he does not care. He's like, well, if they say no, like, okay,
Whatever.
but it's fine. Or they can always negotiate. Okay, you ask. You go ahead and do that, babe.
He
I
needs to
don't
be
feel
an
like
agent.
I'm that bold. He does not care. So we complement each other really well. He
Yeah,
takes care of it.
I love that. I want to move into motherhood overseas. How
Mhm.
has that been for you raising children abroad?
Well, kind of goes both ways. I think you realize whenever you, okay, obviously, first of all, it's difficult because you don't have your support system, which we live in Montana and not close to a lot of family. So we don't really have that anyway. So that's probably different than a lot of people that live close to friends and family. We have just been in and out so much. It's honestly been difficult to find a community there. So I do have friends, but they're more like Marco Polo friends. If you
Yeah.
guys use Marco Polo, know what that is. Or the group text messages. So I don't feel incredibly out of my element in that way, which is kind of unfortunate that I don't have that in the first place. But
It's
whenever we're
too.
overseas, I will say like you just realize how much we have here that's kind of unnecessary. Like you can get by with so little.
Mhm.
Um, and the help would be nice. It would totally be nice. But as far as just a lot of things surrounding birth and kids, I think that there's a lot of noise. Um, for example, this is kind of an extreme. I feel like I only have extreme examples. I'm sorry,
Okay.
but this is kind of an extreme example. But whenever I had Rosie, in Norway, they literally don't touch you. And this was my first pregnancy, first baby. They did not touch me until she was breech, actually, and I still was able to have her naturally in Norway
That's amazing.
because they allow that there. That's fine. Um, but they did not touch me. My water broke, so I was waiting for a contraction. So I was in the hospital. And then the nurse was like, "Can I check you?" Because I was on my ball and I was like, I don't really feel like laying down. I'm just really uncomfortable. And she was like, "Can I check you to just see if you're dilated?" And that was the first and only moment that they touched me. Well, not the only. Whenever I was pushing, they touched me. But that was the only moment. And I was almost 7 centimeters. And she's like, "You need to go to delivery. Like now? We need to move you now." But all that to say is there's so much surrounding for that example, birth in the States. And and I'm not against this, having your pediatrician that and they're on speed dial and you have everything like this particular way. They just did not do that, which was kind of freeing for Blaze. Whenever I had him, I did have him at home. Like I chose to have him at home with midwives. And I was kind of like, you don't have to check in with me all the time. I mean, unless I feel differently, if I'm in pain or if he stops moving, I'm fine. Like they just didn't do that to me the first go round. So I don't really expect all the poking and prodding. Just kind of leave me alone unless
Yeah.
you like really need
Yeah.
need to check me. But it was kind of freeing, but also it was overwhelming the first time around whenever I'm watching my friends give birth and they like know they're a pediatrician and I'm like, I get whoever's on call. Oh, you picked your hospital? I got assigned to a hospital.
Yes.
Different aspect. They're still procreating. It still works. We're fine. Rosie's fine, but it was a lot different than what I had seen.
Yeah.
But all that to say is you just kind of recognize what we're so catered to, which is a huge blessing in the States
Yeah.
and in Canada. We're so catered to, and we have just everything at the tips of our fingers. But again, it's just so much noise. So almost like whenever we go overseas, that noise almost ceases because there's just not that access. It's just not quite the same, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. And there are certain things um, that could be a lot easier that we do have at the tip of our fingers, or if you have your support system, like can't even replace that with anything. Um, but I find that not all of it is bad.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of like good things that I see in Europe where I'm like, we need more of this back home. Like
Yeah.
other child parking
Yeah.
spots, like
Yeah. Coffee
that's not,
shop.
yeah, like the cafe and play, like things like that where I'm
Uh,
like, this is so smart. And I do think
they do
like
cater to kids a lot more in Europe, I feel like.
yeah, you get very what's the word? Not experience, but exposure to like these different
Mm.
cultures and you see how different things work, including your
Right.
own. And I think
Right.
that you find pros and cons of each. Like I'll go back
Yes.
home and be like, oh, I really like that they actually do this in Europe. Uh,
Hmm.
like I don't know if you got a Munder Kinder pass in Germany, but like in Austria, I had one for my son and they keep track of all, it's like a little booklet and they keep track of every vaccination they've had,
That's
even their
nice.
birth, how much they weigh at each appointment. And you
Uh,
take the booklet. And even when I was pregnant, I would take the booklet in and they would write, okay, what my blood pressure was, how much I weighed at this appointment at this week, and yada, yada, yada.
you
So,
have
anyways, I
everything
just thought
right
that
there.
was, yeah, it was
That is
so cool
really
because
nice.
back home, you don't really, I mean, you have like your online portal, which is a godsend, honestly.
Yeah. But
So
there are
nice to,
pros and cons. And you're right. Like,
yeah,
that's another way to look at it is Europe has they do cater to kids a lot. And
yeah,
some things are different. Like I remember in Norway, a lot of the kids slept outside in their bassinets and their
yes.
bassinet strollers, and it's winter outside and the parents are having coffee inside, but they all these just a line of strollers outside. And I took that back. I'm like, oh, well, won't do that whenever it's -40 outside in Montana. But whenever it's, sunny and nice and I can park them, even if it's winter, wow, they sleep great. I'll just take that back
Yes.
to the States and use that little tidbit. But they do cater a lot. Even hotels, they have, I feel like a lot more play spaces and
Mhm.
even the options of just going to an indoor play facility. We had a lot of those in Norway. We had one in Germany. That's so nice. Or an indoor swimming area, which we just don't have a lot. Maybe it's because I live in Montana. We don't
Where in
have a lot
Montana do you
of
live?
that. We live in the Flathead Valley, so not terribly far from Glacier National Park, if you're
Okay.
familiar at
Okay.
all. Yeah, it's kind of
Cool.
random. We like
Yeah.
living on a mountaintop.
We live in Idaho, so we're not too far from you.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean,
Yeah, it's too far.
in retrospect, like we're on the
Yeah,
same side of the country, like just a,
yeah,
skip and hop away. But yeah, I
yeah.
always wanted to visit there, so I was just curious. But yeah,
You're
I mean,
welcome
I think
anytime.
I think there's pros and cons to both, honestly. I think maybe the sense of stability, it's not so much about like where exactly you're located. It's more like just feeling like it's a temporary thing that
Yeah,
I don't know about for you, but for me, I'm like, this is just temporary. So it's hard for me to get
yeah,
into my groove as much as when I'm back home and I'm like, this is it, like so I can kind of dive back in more to like getting involved with things where here
yeah.
I'm just sometimes feel like a floating, like I'm just like, what are we doing today? Where are
Yes.
we
Yeah,
going?
no, I understand that. I feel like, yeah, we've been like that several years. Whereas this year, whenever I had more time to play, and I'm like, okay, can I find a gymnastics class or a ballet class
Yeah.
for Rosie or um, different things like that to just give you something to do, some kind of outlet, some kind of fun for the kids. But whenever you're moving in 16 hours, then you don't always have the time to do that. But hopefully on the team, they're helpful, but they're not always the most helpful with stuff
Not
like that.
always. That's correct. Yes. And Kate, remind me when your daughter was born again. Your
March 2020, March 6th, 2020.
And I remember this situation with you that you had her and you
Mhm.
flew home. How many days after she was born?
7 days. That's a minimum for a lot of airlines, but 7 days and 2 hours old. We got on a flight.
Because yeah, that's when the whole thing out was like an outbreak and like it was like pretty sure there was like something released that Trump was like, we're closing the borders to get home.
Yes.
So everybody had to like just lose
Get
their
home.
absolute mind and figure out a way, where are we going to put all of our stuff? How are we getting home? And you had
Yeah.
just had a baby.
Hmm. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
still
So
remember this,
I
seeing.
remember waking up to a text message from our good friends, I think it was the only other Americans on the team that year. And they were already at the airport and we're like, what is happening? And there was another text message from, um, we were tired, so I guess we went to bed early, but they got it. And so they scheduled a flight out immediately. But another text message from the GM that said verbatim, get the F out of here. And so we had to sit in the embassy and get an emergency passport for Rosie. I'm like, okay, worst case scenario, we're stuck on lockdown in Norway, but I have my baby.
Postpartum. You're literally postpartum at the embassy trying, like,
Yeah.
sounds like
Yeah. I needed an
hell.
emergency passport. And they were so kind. I mean, that's what they're there for, you know, to help you get through. So I'd never thought I would really have to use them in an emergency situation, but they were fantastic.
Yeah.
They were so great. So we got an emergency. So we had to wait on the emergency passport because you cannot book a ticket without passport numbers. And then this is something you wouldn't think of unless you're in the middle of a pandemic and everything's going crazy. But some airlines don't let you book lap infants online. So it was the phone lines were so jacked, so crowded that we couldn't call and put her on our ticket. So we would book one and try to call, line drop, drop, drop. So it was our fourth flight that we actually got her on, and I can't remember what airline we ended up having to use, but it was so we booked it because we could book her in a lap online and not have to call or get any type of customer support to put her on our ticket. Um, and then yeah, it was our fourth flight because flights were canceling left and right also, not because it would be an issue if we showed up at the border after the cutoff because we're citizens, they'll let you in, but getting to the border, you got to get there. And
Yeah.
so the airlines were canceling all these flights because, well, they're not going to be able to get in the border because they're not American citizens. And it was like I think it was March 13th when we got back, which was the deadline when the borders were closing. And it was insane. I remember somebody like kind of haggling me at the airport because I had my baby and they're like, no, no, why do you have your baby? And I'm like, I'm trying to get home. Like
Yeah, you're
I
like, I listen, I don't want to be doing this
out
right
of
now.
this. Exactly. Like, I am 7 days postpartum. You think I want to be doing this? I got to get us home. And it's
Yes.
just in that survival, yeah, fight or flight. Of
Oh my
course, we're in a
God.
fight or flight at all times. Um, but we made it and we're alive and we're fine.
Oh my gosh. That is crazy. And like, you were a week postpartum. Like most
Yeah,
people are unwell a week postpartum. Like that is a lot to have to be mentally deal. Like it's like the last thing you obviously out of your control, right, with everything. But it's like
right.
I think that time is supposed to be about like you. And I think a
Yeah,
lot of women sometimes feel like we're doing this for hockey, but like this is I'm supposed to be like nurturing and taking care of
right.
myself and getting taken care of right now. And right now I'm hopping on a
Survive.
plane, surviving,
Yeah,
flying international with an
during a
infant.
pandemic. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So like that's a lot. And I don't know if you're comfortable talking about your miscarriage and just how you got through that time. Like, was that something you were open about with girls on the team while you were going through it, or was it more of like a private
Well,
thing?
yeah, I didn't mind. So what happened? So our you know this, our life kind of revolves around like game one, game two when you're in playoffs.
Yes.
And so I was going just for a checkup the morning of game one, and the plan was, okay, I'll go for the checkup, all is gonna be good, and I'll come back. You stay with the kids because I've had two healthy pregnancies. Why should I even be concerned? Let them sleep in, and then we'll just switch. You take the car, and you can get to the bus because he had to bus that day to game one of finals. And so I go to the appointment, and I found out there's no heartbeat. And by myself, I drive back, and David, I like pull up, and I'm just kind of in shock. David's
Yeah.
putting in stuff. He's just in the mode, of course, that he should be in. He's throwing his stuff in the passenger seat, and I'm just slow to get out of the car. And he looks at me and he's like, "What? Is everything okay?" And I shook my head and I just started bawling. And I have never heard him cry like he did. Like he just started wailing, like couldn't breathe. And he was supposed to go get on the bus and go to game one. And he was like, I mean, he's never he's played on like a broken foot before. He's played like he gotten a skate to his side and gotten stitches, and he missed 2 minutes of the game because there was an intermission, and then he came back out the next. He doesn't miss, and he called his coach and just told him everything. And he like can't breathe while he's doing it, and he
So,
stayed with me that day because he's like, I can't sit on a bus right now. And it was in the paper actually that it was, I don't even remember what they said, but everybody thought I had the flu. And I remember like it, we were walking around that day because we were just trying to get fresh air. Like, don't sit, we were living in a hotel that year.
yeah,
Um, but we're trying to get fresh air and just get our mind off of it. And there are people that recognize him because it's kind of like a smaller town. Um, but people that recognize him, like coming up to him, like, why aren't you at the game? Why aren't you at the game? And the next morning, I don't remember what the headline was, but this girl like sat the paper on the table as we're having breakfast together and just letting everything sink in. Your world just got turned upside down, and hockey's not really the first thing on your mind. She's put the paper down and she was like, but you look fine. Why weren't you at the game? And I was just like, and he just looked at her like, and he didn't say anything. And he just got up and walked away. And I'm just like, how callous can people be? Or like, how blind can you be? Like, they're not playing cards. We're living life just like you, and things are happening. Game one, and they lost. And I think she was a little like, oh, they lost and you weren't there. And
yeah,
but we didn't mind telling people. But it's like this wasn't the first time like a newspaper like loved to write something about David. We've had plenty of that experience. And I don't think it was anything bad, but you just have those moments with fans that are just so out of place, like so callous. Like, you have no idea what's going on in our life right now. And then it seemed to get like worse that week actually. So because he missed game one, it's like I'm gonna go in and skate with like the guys had the day off. Again, I told you he was a hard worker. Guys had the day off, but he wanted to go in and skate because he missed the game.
yeah,
And then a fluke accident happened. This guy, I don't even think he like played. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. But he did a slap shot into David's foot. And so it wasn't broken, thankfully, but he could not get his foot into his boot the
mm,
next 2 games. So he couldn't get his foot into his boot. And we're elevating it, we're icing it, we're like doing everything we can to get the swelling down, and it just will not fit into his boot. So then that happened. He came back game four. And I remember like going to the rink and people asking it, are you feeling better? Like, I heard you had the flu. And I'm like, I didn't have the flu, I had a miscarriage. Like, it's just so matter of fact because I'm like, I would
yeah,
never, I have had the flu. I have been projectile vomiting, and so have the kids. And he still goes to work. Like, that's why we're here.
yeah,
That, like, he's so, I don't know. Like, I am also, when we have to be serious about their job, like, I'm not gonna ask him to stay home when I have the flu or if I'm just sick. There's
yeah.
something else going on. But anyway, not that's not their fault. And if they think that that's okay, that's fine. That's just not how we roll.
Right.
Um, because
Just to make assumptions that that like there's more to life than hockey. You know what I mean? Like
right,
if
right,
people
right,
think
right.
like, I mean, obviously a lot of things take a back seat, but like in the realm of life, like there is more to life than hockey, and like people have families and people have things going on and experiences that people that are more important than hockey are going through. And like obviously that affects him as well, that he needed to take that space for you and for himself. And I think that's like very respectable that he was able to stay back with you too during that time. And like that must have been
Yeah,
frustrating.
recognizing that. I remember saying, I was like, would they even allow you to do that in the NHL? And he was like, yes. I'm like, okay. And for some reason, that made me feel better.
Hmm.
And I know like it shouldn't even be an issue, but
Yeah.
you're so close to the finish line. They're in finals, and it's like, oh, I want you to finish well, but you have this massive
Yeah.
personal thing going on. And it gets even more extreme actually. So he played game four. I'm literally walking around with like a jar, not knowing if she's gonna come out naturally, and I'm like dying inside, like I don't want her to go in the toilet if I'm at the rink or if I'm at a restaurant. And so I ended up having to take induction medication, which I had no idea that would actually give you labor contractions.
Mm. Yeah.
So this is like the wee hours of game five, we like before he has to leave. But I start going into labor and I labor with her for a few hours and end up my like water broke and I like pushed her out, plus then all the things. Like in our hotel room, I'm trying to be silent because we're living in a hotel room and I'm in the bathtub trying to manage contractions. And I only woke him up. And this is how like great he does not make me feel this way, but this is like how serious that I was taking him playing and finishing well is like, I can't wake him up because I know he needs rest, but I don't really know what's happening. And they didn't tell me that it was going to be like labor. So I kind of got scared and I woke him up and I was like, I don't really know what's going on. Like, I don't know if it should be this bad. Like, I feel like this is Blaze because um I was in the bathtub and that's how it was with Blaze. It felt so similar. Um, but anyway, I woke him up and he can't really do anything, but he's standing beside me trying to support me. But about 30 minutes later, I delivered her. And as soon as I get everything cleaned up and whatever, I lay down with him and immediately I'm like, I just want you to still go play today. Don't feel like you have to stay home. And he was like, I can't do that. And I was like, I'm gonna cry. And I was like, yes, you can. Just finish. We're so close. Just finish. Let's just get home. You can't do anything anymore. I'll take the kids to the playground. It's gonna be fine. I want you to go and I just want you to finish well.
Mm.
And he he left 3 hours later to get on the bus. And he was like, he thought I was insane. But
I'm
I
sure
don't
you
know.
felt awful too, like just like felt probably unnatural leaving you, but
Yeah, totally. But it's kind of like we had an end in sight and they ended up winning everything in game six. But even like at game six and they won everything and I'm on the ice whenever the confetti is coming down, well, he and I just both looked at each other and it's supposed to be like such a cool, amazing moment, no matter what league you're in.
Mhm.
And we're just looking at each other, knowing exactly what we're thinking. We're like, we just want to go home. Like we're glad we finished. Feel
Yeah.
like we were here and helped, and the team won. Great. Okay, that's really what we wanted. And all right, can we just tie up our loose ends and just go home? Like there was just no joy in it. Actually, one of the doctors that I went to see was on the ice, and he was looking at me. He was like, "This is amazing. Oh, don't worry about it. You can get another baby." And I was like, I just want to crawl in a hole right now. I just
Oh my gosh. That is
At
so
that
expensive.
reminds me of what I said prior. Like when I say like I had no other steps to give and like I needed Jesus to carry me through that. Like that week was insane. And you would think like, oh, that's like the year he won, the a cup. I don't even know what it's called there, honestly, but that's the year he won finals with the team. Oh, that should be like so cool. And it was literally the worst week of our life. And the team was amazing. The place was amazing. They're wonderful. Um, but yeah, you just never know what people are carrying in those moments.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Like, obviously, time has passed since then, but that is such a heartbreaking story and such a trauma that you have to like carry. And I'm sure are probably still processing like pieces of that because like I've never even heard of something like so like you're in a hotel room, you're in a foreign country, you've never, gone through something like this. Like that's awful. Like that is so sad. And I appreciate you sharing that though, because I think there's a lot of women that have gone through miscarriages abroad or just at home. And especially in this hockey community, I think the elements of hockey make it a very unique situation when it does happen to you, you know, incorporated with hockey.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
not just like your husband can take off a bunch of time and, it's like
Yeah.
it's still go, go, go. And it's
And
kind
they
of
were the
helpless.
the higher ups in the organization were very willing to allow him to take time, but we were just like, I want to be clear about that. Like they did not force him at all. They were so like those people were fantastic. Um, but we just wanted to finish. I don't know. And I don't know if that's
You
like,
kind of feel a little obligated in a sense to,
yeah, I mean, you know you're done in a couple of days and it nothing, what are we gonna do? Sit around on the couch and like cry about it? Yeah, but I don't have to
yeah,
whenever he's supposed to be game. At least it's a decent distraction and then we can go home and take
yeah,
her home and yeah, do that.
that is so hard. I'm so sorry.
But it's crazy like being in a hotel. That was insane. But it's a wild looking back. I'm realizing how God was even like looking out for me in those moments, even though it didn't seem like it.
Mhm.
I got to know, I feel like I've had like this sweet friend that's been like an angel every year, even if it's only been like 2 weeks and then they get traded. I remember that happening in Vladivostok, like where they in Russia, where they like, here's where you go to the grocery store. This is what this is. This is what this means. She'd already figured everything out. They got traded like 2 weeks after we got there, but she was just a little like a little angel sent
Yeah,
to me moment. And had we not lived in that hotel, I wouldn't have made this friend that worked at the hotel. And whenever I told her about it, like she actually had lost her son to SIDS. So I think he was like 10 months old and we still keep in contact, but I mean, I'm like having to navigate. I wanted to bring Ellie home and we wanted to bury her at home if we could preserve her. And so uh, whenever you need to ask crazy questions like that, she understood where I was coming from and was also able to like make phone calls for me. So before like game 5, David and I are like walking around to this place that she told us to go to like preserve our infant little body so we could take her back home. And but this I wouldn't have gotten to know this person had we not lived in the hotel. And the
yeah,
hotel was terrible, but like I needed her so much. And even, I remember watching um was it game I guess it was game 6. That's what it was. And I was so my cortisol was just through the roof already that I couldn't even really watch the game very well because even the physical play isn't like I have seen like in the NHL and KHL by any means, but it's still there. And I just didn't have the capacity. Like I remember somebody cross-checking David and just like how he fell down, I was like, I can't take this. I like dove into her lap, but I was so stressed out that I couldn't even watch the
yeah,
physical that we are very accustomed to watching. I have seen many, many, many worse things that have been done to him. This was not even a bad hit. I mean,
yeah,
cross aren't fun, um, but I just did not have the capacity to even watch it in that moment either. And it's just wild. But I'm sure I'm not the only person that's had to process through something like that in our
and I'm sure
community.
like someone that will listen to this episode will very much relate to what you're saying, like possibly reach out and like hopefully like even that could be therapeutic. Because I think when you do meet someone in this lifestyle that has have gone through similar experiences, like even just processing like birth stuff from abroad, like that is almost like healing in a way that you're like, oh,
Oh,
like
totally.
you know what I've
Totally.
gone through, like, you know.
Right. Especially miscarriage, it can be so secretive and like, oh, don't share that
Yes,
or
like you
other
feel
people
shame.
uncomfortable. Like, who cares?
Yeah,
Why? It
yeah,
shouldn't. This is
no,
trauma. We need to
yeah,
talk to each other. We need to communicate about stuff like that.
100%. Okay, I feel like we need to do a part two because there's so much that I feel like we still need to talk about. And I, there's a lot of highs and lows that come with hockey, and you guys have been in it for 19 years, 19 seasons. That's, girl, I props to you because I don't know how you're still doing it for this length of time. But what would you say is like the
Gosh.
biggest thing that you've learned about yourself going through everything you've been through, everything with hockey, the moves, the trades, the babies abroad, the miscarriage abroad? Like, is there one key takeaway that you're like, you've learned about yourself?
You know how we were talking about this is just the first thing that comes to mind, and I'm sure that we could make a list of things, but kind of what we were talking about earlier when people complain about those like very minuscule things that just don't matter. I have learned that I am so capable, not necessarily like by myself, maybe with some help, but you can everything you can figure out. You can adapt. You're not going to die. It's just you can accomplish so much and you can face so much more than you ever think that you're capable of doing. I mean, if I were to put some of these scenarios together in my head, like the one where we're just talking about with the miscarriage and finals and all every day that had something traumatic happen, I would if you would have told me that I would endure that, I would be like, no, there's absolutely no way.
Mhm.
Um, but this life throws so many curveballs at you. And you can either, we can cry about it, of course, like I've cried about many things, but then you can actually face it and you can hit things head on and you're capable. I
Mhm.
think anybody should know that. Like you are capable of so much more than you think you are. And I think that's important to know with all the things that are thrown at us.
I love that. That was such a good answer. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. If
Thanks for having
anyone
me.
wants to reach, I feel like we're leaving on like an awkward note because I'm like, I still like so many questions for you. I know there's like so much more that we didn't cover, but if anyone wants to reach out to you, where can they find you on Instagram?
Yep, I'm on Instagram, Ashley E. Booth. That's
Yay.
all.
Well, thank you
No.
so much. That was fun.
Thank you. I so enjoyed it.